Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into one of the most mind-bending contradictions in all of biology. We're talking about microscopic entities that have literally shaped human history and caused massive global shutdowns, but they completely defy the basic rules of what it means to be a living creature. Yep, we're talking about viruses. And as you'll see, these tiny little invaders really force us to blur the lines between living biology and, well, just mere chemistry.
So, let's just put the big question out there right away. Are viruses actually alive? I mean, when you catch a nasty cold, it definitely feels like some living thing is attacking you, right? But as we start to comb through the evidence today, you're going to feel a bit of cognitive dissonance. Because the closer we look at a virus, the less it looks like a living organism, and it actually starts looking way more like a highly sophisticated, but completely lifeless machine.
To get why this is so confusing, we have to look at the stark contrast between true living organisms and viruses. Think about literally any living thing, a plant, a polar bear, or even just a single-celled bacterium. What do? Well, they respire, they feed, they excrete waste, they grow, and they move. But a virus? It cannot do a single one of those things on its own. No breathing, no eating, no growing. If you just leave a virus sitting on a table, it acts like a completely inert, lifeless object. So, how on earth do they cause so much chaos?
Well, to understand that, let's look at Section 1, Anatomy of a Hijacker. First things first, we have to wrap our heads around their scale. Viruses are small, like impossibly small, way smaller than the cells that make up your own body. You absolutely cannot see them with those standard microscopes you might remember from high school biology labs. To even catch a glimpse of a virus, scientists, like the one you see here working in a lab over in Jakarta, have to use highly specialized equipment called an electron microscope. The viruses we're looking at have to be magnified 100,000 times just so our eyes can perceive them. It's wild to think about just how tiny they truly are.
So what do we actually see when we zoom in that far? Well, unlike you or me, viruses aren't made of cells. They have absolutely no cell membrane and zero cytoplasm. Instead, they've got this remarkably simple but deadly effective architecture. The outside is basically a coat made entirely of protein. And stuck all along the outside of that coat are these little pegs. Think of those pegs like physical keys to a lock. And inside that projective shell, safely tucked away, is the virus's actual payload.
And that payload? That's called RNA. RNA is an absolutely incredible substance. It's basically made up of these tiny threads that hold a very precise set of coded instructions. But here's the kicker. Those instructions have one and only one purpose: making more viruses. So if the protein code is the delivery truck, the RNA is the ultimate biological hacker's code. But remember what we said earlier. The virus doesn't have any internal machinery to actually read this code itself. It needs a factory.
Which brings us to Section 2, the replication process. How these things actually multiply.
Since viruses can't do anything on their own, they literally have to get inside a living cell just to survive and multiply. It's basically a three-step hostile takeover. Step 1 is invasion. The virus uses those little exterior pegs we talked about to stick onto the outside of your living cell, and then it sneaks inside. Step 2 is the hijacking. Once it's in, the virus bursts open and releases its RNA threads. It then actively forces your cell's internal machinery to stop doing its normal jobs and instead forces it to read the viral instructions. Your cell is suddenly a virus printing factory. And finally, Step 3, the exit. This whole process is called replication, and unfortunately, it is entirely fatal for the host cell. The newly minted viruses burst right out of the dying cell, completely ready to infect neighboring cells and start the whole brutal cycle all over again.
Just look at this incredible electron microscope skein. See that massive green area taking up the bottom? That is a living host cell. And all those dozens of tiny brown objects swarming all over it, those are H3N2 influenza viruses. You are quite literally watching them attach to the outer layer of the cell, getting ready to inject their RNA and force that cell right into the replication cycle. It suddenly makes this invisible invasion process feel very, very real, doesn't it?
Now let's move on to Section 3, famous viral villains, and look at their real-world impact.
Let's actually stick with the exact virus we were just looking at, the H3N2 influenza virus. This is a remarkably dangerous kind of flu. It's highly adaptable, meaning it can infect the cells of birds, humans, and other mammals alike. And its way in is almost deceptively simple. It gets into your body by going straight up your nose when you breathe in, just everyday breathing. Once it's in there, it causes a severely unpleasant and dangerous illness. To really grasp its power, we just have to look back at history. In the years between 1968 and 1969 alone, these specific flu viruses killed approximately 1 million people worldwide. 1 million.
And then, of course, we have an invader that every single one of us is incredibly familiar with today, SARS-CoV-2. Check out its distinct structure here. The gray sphere in the middle is that protective protein coat. But really look at those red bits poking out all over the surface. Those are the famous spike proteins. They do the exact same job as the pegs we discussed earlier. They are those highly specialized keys that let the virus physically attach to human cells and force its way inside.
The story of SARS-CoV-2 is basically a masterclass in viral efficiency. As you know, it first appeared late in 2019. Now, while scientists are still studying its exact origin point, they believe it developed in a wild animal before making the jump over to humans. The illness it causes, COVID-19, which by the way stands for Coronavirus Disease 2019, was devastating. Because of those highly effective spike proteins and the fact that our human immune systems were completely naive to it, this virus spread at lightning speed to absolutely every corner of the globe.
So that brings us right back to Section 4, alive or not, the scientific divide.
Here is the honest truth. There is a huge, ongoing scientific divide about this. The experts literally do not agree. On one side of the fence, you have scientists who consider viruses to be living organisms because, well, they possess genetic code, that RNA, and they have this intense, undeniable drive to multiply, adapt, and evolve. I mean, that certainly sounds like life, right? But on the flip side, plenty of scientists firmly argue they are not alive, because without a host cell, they are essentially just microscopic dust. They can't respire, they don't grow, they can't move, and they don't eat. They are missing the most fundamental self-sustaining traits of literally every other living thing on Earth.
So I'm going to leave this one up to you. You've seen their blueprints, you've looked at the electron microscope scans, you know for a fact that they carry coded instructions but absolutely require another living cell's factory to do anything at all. Based on all the biological evidence we've covered in this explainer today, what's your verdict? Are viruses truly living organisms, or are they just highly complex, terrifyingly efficient, tiny little machines? It is a fascinating mystery, and one that absolutely continues to push the boundaries of how we define life itself. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep questioning the microscopic world around you.